This is a lecture by L. Ron Hubbard given on the 20th of August, 1963. The title of this lecture is the Itsa Line. This tape is 87 minutes long.
How are you today? All right, this is what? 20 August 8013. Thank you. Well, this is a lecture on the Itsa Line. About time. The Itsa Line. Why is it called the Itsa Line? The auditor says, "What's it?" And the PC says, "Itsa." It is the PC's communication line from PC to auditor. And it isn't necessarily pursuant to the auditor's what's it. It is sometimes pursuant to the PC's what's it. PC very often puts in his own what's it. Okay, there are numerous communication lines between the auditor and the PC, and the aggregate of these make up what you call the auditing cycle. The auditing cycle is made up of several communication lines. The communication line is cause, distance, effect. I call your attention to Dianetics 1955 for the full definition of a communication line. What is a communication? Intention, attention, duplication, at the point of effect, and so forth. All those are quite important and technically accurate. What you're mainly interested in is cause, distance, effect. Cause, distance, effect is a communication line. A communication line is not cause, distance, effect, cause, distance, effect. That's two communication lines. Now, a communication line can be very faint. And one of those that you'll find out routinely on an auditor is the attention line. Line 1 minor. Line 1 minor, the attention line. And that is just consistently out. But as I say, there are numbers of these. We're not particularly going into them. That's the first line. Let's get the PC's attention. How do you get the PC's attention? Because the PC to put his attention on the auditor. And that line is the one that is put in. Now, that line itself can be complex and become 2 lines or 3 lines. PC sitting there, and he's saying gob, gob, walla, walla, something. And the auditor wants to get his attention on him. See, it has to have attention on the auditor. Now, the auditor can't really give an auditing command or do anything with his command unless he gets his attention line in. Now, that can be done very crudely. You can drop the E-meter. You can cough loudly in the PC's face. Tip over your chair. Get angry. There's, in essence, numbers of ways to get this line in very, very wrong. And the line has to be put in. However, and very often you find a PC fogging around at the beginning of session. And his attention is not on the auditor. It's really not on his case. It's not on anything you're trying to do, and so forth. Well, how do you get it there? Well, one of the ways of getting it there is having an attention line already extant. You then convert it to an Itsa line. Now, this is the whole trick, because there's another attention line. There is attention on what? See? And this looks like another attention line. It's actually 1 minor. It just isn't putting the attention on the auditor. It's putting attention on something else. And this is a little trick I used to do. It used to baffle everybody in ACCs. They used to get baffled, and everybody would drop his jaw and look at me dully when I would try to get them to do this. And it's been wholly unsuccessful, but by dividing down the auditing cycle into these various communication lines and component parts, I will bravely take another crack at it. It's slippy. I know if I give this to you, it'll become a repetitive command process. Which it isn't. It's slippy, that's all. Is you just very adroitly, without really putting the PC's attention on anything except what his attention should be on, just flick the PC's attention over to what it should be on. I'll give you an idea. PC is saying, I just can't stand these wild parties. Just can't stand them. Had one last night and just can't stand them and so forth. It's just too much music and everything. And I got an awful present time problem because this girl's boyfriend came over and wanted to pop me in the eye because I was getting too familiar. And it was terrible, and present time problem. And you know you're running the GPM to be sexual, see? This you know about the case. This I'm giving you also is the Itsa Line. Hey, we're getting a nice storm tape here too, Peter. We'll cut the storm off of it. And so forth, and sell it. They go great in the Middle West. They love storm tapes. It reminds them of home. I had a green tornado one time in Kansas. Never been back since. 25-pound blocks of ice were falling out of a pea soup green sky. And the visibility had dropped down to about 15 feet. Bright green. Never quite recovered. It's impossible. Couldn't have happened. But it did. Now, your PC's attention being all over the confounded place, the auditor sits back and says he's going to put in the Itsa Line. Now, usually by this, unless he is well trained and has this data and so forth, this means he's going to sit back and leave the PC's attention totally uncontrolled. The Itsa Line, when you first start giving it to people, is just never doing anything but listen. And that's because people think it is simply a communication line, and it isn't. But we will go on to this in a moment. Now, therefore, this PC is running on and on and on about this party. This is slippy auditing. I can sit and do this by the hour, and PC never finds out about it, and there's no command process being run and everything else, and tone arm moves like mad, and so forth. It requires a certain estimation of effort, you understand? And I actually, years and years ago, despaired getting anybody to control attention that lightly. This is another effort to do so, see? So you say, he's going on, and this guy came over and he almost bought me, but this was a nice-looking girl and so forth, and I had a terrible problem because of my wife, you know, and so on, and here we go, see? Now, the auditor who is not well informed and who is not well skilled just sits back and listens to this whole thing. Now, to do anything about it suddenly is to put line 1 minor in on the auditor. Clank! And boy, the PC lay RC brake, see? Because the sudden shift of attention. So the whole thing is the skill by which you can take line 1 minor and flick it over onto what you were doing or want to do in the session. a skill with which you can do this. And believe me, this is a skill maneuver. And when you were really skilled at this, you could almost sit down and run a full auditing session, and even a casual observer would think you were simply listening to the PC, which you weren't at all. You were actually directing the PC's attention very closely. The PC was talking exactly about what you wanted that PC to talk about, and nothing else. And the PC never realizes that their attention has been grooved on it. Now, that would be the tremendous difference between psychoanalysis listening and Scientology auditing. You see, these things could look quite alike. The psychoanalyst, one, did not really know what to direct anybody's attention to. See? He didn't know the anatomy of the bank. He thought if he could direct somebody's attention to sexual incidents in early childhood, he had it made. Well, now a PC actually follows, in his case, at any given moment, the least charged line. A PC will always follow the least charged line. Get this good, because that's one of those remarks that goes by in the night, and you wonder someday you're sitting there auditing somebody, and you don't know what to do, and so forth. And it's one of those things that if you knew that well, you'd know exactly what to do. He always follows the least charged line with his tone arm action. If you're going to get tone arm action, it is on the least charged aberrative line. Not the least charged thing he could talk about, but the least charged aberrative line. The tone arm action exists on the least charged aberrative line at any given moment in a case progress. Always the least charged aberrative line. Now, give you what I mean by that. Let's take dynamics. You've got 8 dynamics you could audit on the PC. The third dynamic is what the PC is always coming up with. Well, if you kept the PC on the third dynamic, you know you would get tone arm action, because this happens with the PC to be the least charged line. You got it? Now, the other lines do not give tone arm action, and this does not mean they are not charged. It means they are overcharged. There is too much charge on them. Got that? So you're always trying to snake through the minefield on the least popping firecrackers to get your tone arm action. You got that? You want little ones that'll just tingle his feet. You don't want those that'll blow his legs off. You understand? Well, the mind is so regulated and safety valved that it will not release charges which the PC considers over his ability to tolerate. Now, an auditor can actually punch these charges into view. He's got all the materials in his hand, and therefore he could actually throw the PC into areas which are overcharged areas to be run. The areas are overcharged. The result of an overcharged area is a stuck tone arm. Stuck tone arms have many peculiarities and particularities. You can say that if you want to really get tone arms moving, you have to get the GPMs on a case run. That's the most likely to give you tone arm action because it's the most aberrative in terms of time. You can say a lot of things about tone arm action. You say tone arm action sticks because of time. These things are all true. But with regard to charge, what you really want to know with regard to charge is that in the presence of too much charge, the TA ceases to operate. TA action ceases when you have too much charge. That doesn't say that you couldn't bleed it, that you couldn't work your way around it, that there aren't means of getting off the charge anyhow, and all that sort of thing. But when you see a TA ceasing to operate and ceasing to act, then you have entered an area of too much charge, particularly on an extremely high or an extremely low TA. Do you follow that? Too much charge. It's not because there's nothing there to run. It's because there's too cockeyed much there. See that? And if you don't get tone arm action, then the charge that holds the significances and ideas, postulates, cognitions, and that sort of thing in place, the corny electrical charge, you understand, no other significance connected with it, this thing packed up and held in facsimiles, masses, all of this sort of thing, won't then let the case advance. And you get no case advance in the absence of tone arm action. That's it. I mean, there aren't any ands, ifs, ours, or buts about it. No tone arm action, no case advance. I don't care if you erase the somatic. I don't care if the PC has ceased to have lumbosis. I don't care about any of these things. Because you're not auditing the body. As far as this PC is concerned, no tone arm action, no case advance. Now, can you worsen no tone arm action? Yes. You can bring about no needle action on top of no tone arm action. And if you insist on running a PC without tone arm action, you soon will begin to see it expressed over here in the needle, which will get tighter and tighter and tighter. And after a while, everything locks up. And then if you use real desperate measures, why, you can just freeze the PC into something that'll feel to him like solid rock. The longer you run a case without tone arm action, the more you will freeze the case into no tone arm action. And the more the case is frozen into no tone arm action, the less chance you have of getting charge off by any means. You see this? I mean, you're walking away from the point of resolution. The further you go with no tone arm action, the less likely you are to fortuitously produce some. So it's not just, well, he's running without tone arm action and brush it off, you see. It's, oh my God, he's running without tone arm action. Hey. No tone arm action. Hey. No tone arm action. Get some tone arm action. You know? It's that type of emotional response, you know. Not, well, he's running without tone arm action, so he isn't getting any better. And so on. Guy being run without tone arm action is somebody you're watching go down the big toboggan. And the longer this goes on, the harder it's going to get tone arm action. Now, the most likely way to get tone arm action on any condition, any case, or anything is getting in the Itsa line. This has processes connected with it. These processes are designated Routine 1C, C for communication. Routine 1C, this is the soft touch process. This is the process that I will be given to Scientology 1 auditors. And after you've studied it and used it a year or two, you'll find out that there's a lot more to know about it. It is at once the clumsiest use. It's the workhorse, you see. You say, well, you've got two processes to make an OT. You've got 3N, you've got R3R. No, you've always got three processes. See, if you've got two like that, then you've always got one more, and that'll always be the Itsa Line or 1C. See? This is the workhorse. This is the workhorse. And yeah, somebody in a co-audit, yes, sure, somebody doing a book auditing job, yeah, some student academy, yeah, these people, oh yes, these guys will be able to make progress with this thing. But before he's gone very long in the academy, before he's done very much auditing, he'll all of a sudden begin to believe. He'll do one of two things. Either, well, I just get tired of just sitting there listening to him talk, you know, I just get tired of this. So this Itsa Line isn't so good, see. He didn't even know what it was in the first place, see. Or he will all of a sudden begin to realize that there is a certain deafness required here, or one will just continue to sit and listen, and the PC goes on and talks and talks. Well, look, they talked for 5 years in psychoanalysis without getting any place. We don't know that they had tone arm action, but we sure know they didn't get any place. They did, pardon me, I'm maligning them, boys. I'm maligning them. They got careful. Right? They did get someplace. But look at here. You'll learn then that an overcharged case can most easily be bled down by the Itsa Line, and you'll restore tone arm action. So the best way to restore tone arm action to any case that has become overcharged through being run in the wrong departments is getting in the Itsa Line. Now that's your base process. You can restore tone arm action no matter how badly the case has been jammed up if you are clever in handling the Itsa Line. And when I say Itsa Line and when I say clever, yes, they're very definitely joined together. Clever. It is not a process, it's a cleverness. And the biggest trouble you have anything with is, as we'll come back to this, line 1 minor. Why put the attention on the auditor when all you've got to do is shift it slightly in the PC? This guy is saying, well, and so forth, and we had this big hassle at this party, and my wife bawled me out, and everybody bawled me out, and so forth. And I got this terrible present time problem. I got this awful hangover, and I'm having an awful time in this session, and so on, and so on, and so on. Yeah, under a long series of runs, you could probably take apart this present time problem, but you were running on the PC the goal to be sexual. The PC is having trouble with being sexual, that's for sure. Well, that's where the cleverness is. Was there anything that happened, is what the PC's talking about got anything to do with what you were doing? Right? So, of course, the adroit question practically walks up and hits you in the head. The adroit question is, PC takes a long breath and momentarily he isn't going on any further. Just momentarily. See, he actually hasn't run his communication line out terribly, but he's just been floundering. You're getting minimum tone arm action. And you say, did our last session have anything to do with this? Oh. Let's see, what the hell were we doing in the last session? Well, I don't know. Just review what we were doing. Well, let's see. So on. So we had the ARC break, and we were doing something or other. And so on. We were running out some kind of items. There's this backtrack. There's this stairs or something there. Let me see now. I'm getting it now. And so forth. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we were running... you see, I really can't get anywhere near this. I'm so worried about my present time problem. But we were running some goal. Oh, yes. Did he say, what do you know? Yeah, I sure do have a lot of trouble with this thing to be sexual. Yeah, I sure do. Yeah, I have a lot of trouble with that. Well, you say, well, what items did we have there right toward the last? Well, I think we arrived at this point on the line plot, and I think it was absolutely no, it was Nick's. Yeah, well, all right, there we are. You're starting to see your tone arm move, and your needles start to twist. And he never knew what happened. Magic, man, magic. It's gently taking line 1 minor without actually putting it on the auditor and putting it back to the subject of the auditing. And you see, there's no process that you can announce that will do this, because the auditing is tremendously variable, and the PC's worries and concerns are fantastically agglomerate. Now, sometimes the PC has legitimately had a present-time problem and something catastrophic has occurred between sessions. Something like this. This is just using this factor for just a present-time problem. And it's something way off. And the only thing you can do is to keep flicking that attention line. Flick. It's really not a what's-it line. Your what's-it's already in, you see. And you just keep moving it around till the PC will ventilate the PTP that he's worrying about. Now, the crudest, but still acceptable example of this is simply, tell me about it. See, that's crude. See, that's something like we're going to build a house, so we pile up some bricks. That's crude. That's about as adroit as the cow doing the twist. See? But nevertheless, it's functional. You do get some motion. I couldn't forbear to milk that gag. Now, so there's the PC, see? And the PC's can't get his mind on what you're doing because something else has happened. And this something else is real worried. And maybe it's worried down to the level of grief charge or something like this, see? Well, all you can do is move this little attention line around onto things that'll give him Itzas. And you can cut it down from, well, actually failing to relieve the situation. That's how bad it can be, see? You just didn't really relieve his problem. Or you relieved it somewhat, or you next grade is you spent the session making him feel better about that present time problem. You were well into the acceptable band, if we got to be, or we handled it in the first 2 hours of the session, or we handled it in the first hour of the session, or we handled it in the first 15 minutes of the session. And that difference of time has very little to do with the seriousness of the problem. It has everything to do with the cleverness of the auditor. Without putting the attention line on himself, without cutting the Itsa line, adroitly shifting that little attention line there to this and that. Well, the person says, but I don't see why we had to fight half the night after we got home. I told her I just was attracted by blondes and so forth, and she just wouldn't listen, and so forth. And the auditor says, what have you found out about arguments like that with your wife? Well, Itsa. Oh, that's fine. All right. Now, how do you feel about this problem now? Oh, the problem's all right. Well, he's still a little bit fluttery. So, well, let's review now what we were doing on something or other. Got the idea? Well, we were doing so-and-so, and, well, you know what we were doing as well as I do. All right, yeah, probably, but I may not have full records here of this. There might have been something that came up during a session or something like this, or during between sessions. You might have thought of something else. Oh, yes, I did, as a matter of fact. You're awake. Got the idea? Actually, it's just about as skilled as building a watch. But because there's no apparent skill there, don't you see, it gets slightly into disrepute. People can watch a session in which this is occurring, and they really never even hear the auditor say anything. See? And the PC never really hears the auditor say anything, because the attention line isn't, all right, now. All right, okay, all right. Yeah, I got all that you're talking about. Now, all right, now we're going to give you the next auditing command. The next the next auditing command. You got that now? Got that now. All right, here we are now. All right. Do birds suffocate? Okay. Got that now. Do birds suffocate? Well, you've re-stimulated some charge. I won't say what recharge you've re-stimulated. See, now that can grade on down from just too much. You see, that can grade on down to... Do suffocating birds have anything to do with this? Were there any birds suffocating in that? See? Well, do you think your processing has bettered this situation? Well, we're really getting feather light, aren't we? PC hardly heard you say it, and neither would anybody else, you see. Well, let's see. Let's go over what we've covered so far in auditing. Well, now, you had a couple of cognitions in the last session there that had something to do with this. Have you had any other cognitions with regard to goals and so forth, these implanted goals? This get awful adroit. So. You actually got something he's already been talking about, and you put it in by the duplication factor. You duplicate what he has been talking about, and you just pull his Itsa line a little bit further and put it on something, see? I'll give you an idea doing this. He said, well, auditing. I get these awful headaches in auditing and that sort of thing. Well, have you particularly gotten them while we've been running goals? A few sessions later, he's forgotten all about these headaches and so forth. We're having a hard time getting these Itsa line in. How about these headaches? Are they troubling you much now when we run these goals and that sort of thing? How are these headaches? Sounds merely solicitous. It isn't. It's Itsa line. So you've taken a dead-ended communication line someplace back down the line and you've repeated its subject. So therefore you have made a duplication. So you've created a communication line. It's all very technical. And the person's attention goes back onto this and he has to make a comparison. He has to say his headaches are better or worse or there's no change. And while he's doing this, he has to put his attention on GPMs or whatever you're trying to run on it. And you say, well, this last one that we were running in the last session, the last one, to be nutty, to be crazy in the head, or something like that. How are the somatics in the head getting along there? Were they turning on and off and so forth while we've been running that? Oh, well, you shouldn't really remark on this because I had them pretty well off. Well, what item did they go off on? Well, they went off on, well, I really don't know. Someplace in the first part of it. That an item in there is idiotably, I think it was idiotably nutty. Yeah, that was the one. Hey, I got that headache again, you know. You say, well, give me Nick's idiotably nutty. Your way. He doesn't know what hit him. It's moving that attention line adroitly, see? Adroit. With the little pinky, the little finger, you know, raised just right on the teacup. See? Now you'll see an auditor who really hasn't got much feeling for it, no tools and so forth. Why, he's got this teacup with both paws wrapped around it, you see. And you'll see somebody else has poured the tea into the saucer with both paws wrapped around the saucer and inhaling at a very large number of decibels. So that you'll see this in all of its shades of gray, you think, down to outright black. But before you understand anything much about the Itsa line, you have to understand that there is such a thing as an attention line. Line 1 minor. And unless you can handle that attention line slightly, adroitly, greatly, smoothly, You'll curse yourself sometimes. Even the best of an auditor will say, well, let's get to running this GPM now, or something. Cut your throat. You spend the next 15 minutes getting out of this hole. See, it was just too much in the wrong place. See, and it just smashed everything up, and the PC is busy explaining to you that he is 8,000 light years from that GPM, and his attention wasn't on it. You know, you find yourself making these mistakes. Don't knock yourself in the head and say, well, I'm terrible at this, and run a big make guilty on self because you don't handle this well always. Just those times you have been clever, pat yourself on the back. That's the one to pay attention to. I'm not kidding you, because, well, I gave a session last night, and I dropped 3 times. Once I dropped a handful of anvils on the floor, shook up the session most interestingly, and another time I put off a whole chain of firecrackers in the middle of the auditing table, and another time practically ran the mains voltage through the cans. But that was 3, see? That was 3. But there was 2 hours worth, and probably something on the order of 150 that were handled, you know, with such aplomb, man, that nobody ever found out anything about it, and they got the PC out of the woods gorgeously. Quantitatively, see? Of course, what you put your attention on, those 3 that had to be patched up, see? Well, your attention wasn't on it. Well, I'm very sorry. And so I cut your communication, you know, sorry, and so forth. Well, what would you have said if I hadn't have interrupted that, see? Good recovery, see, level, and so forth. Nevertheless, if you really were self-critical to a vast degree, you would have been practically kicking your brains out for having pulled any one of these 3. PC's going on and saying, well, I think I have blown that last GPM. I think I have blown that. Well, all right, good. Let's check some of its items. Oh, cut your throat, man. Just put the PC's attention on the wrong thing, the wrong place. It's all gone crash. PC's needle goes dirty. Get the idea? You see, you're split between wanting the PC to think well of you and getting your job done. And these 2 things are very often, they're dipolar phenomena. You try and get your job done sometimes uphill against something, and in the final analysis, it just merely depends on, did you get your job done? See? That's what it really depends on in the final analysis. But in the process of getting your job done, you happen to have ARC broke the PC and cut the PC's communication line several times. Well, the difference between a good and bad auditor is not whether the auditor always audits smoothly with never cutting an Itsa line, but whether or not he attains his eventual objective without creating so many ARC breaks that the PC's case has not improved. That's the test. If you go around training people on the basis of you must never cut an Itsa line, you must never create an ARC break, you must never upset the PC, all of these things, you see, is something like laying in a GPM, you know. Oh, the first place is an impossible attainment. Always train them with, be as clever and adroit as you can. And you can be a little more adroit than that. He dropped his E-meter in the PC's lap halfway through the session. Poor handling of the attention line. Why? PC's attention went on meter, not on own case. All right. Now, how many dozen ways are there to shift the PC's attention? I don't know. Dozens, thousands. I'll give you an idea. You got an alcoholic. You're trying to process this alcoholic, see. Alcoholic's drunk in most sessions, and you know you're not supposed to order somebody who's drunk. All alcoholics do is sit there and say, well, Alcoholics Anonymous say you can't cure anybody with alcoholism. That's all he's going to say, you see. He knows you can't help him. He's saying it's impossible. Right? And you say, well, the case is unauditable. Yes, the case is unauditable to everybody except those who are surpassingly skilled with the attention line and the Itsa line. The what's it line is practically missing. Now, what have you learned about Alcoholics Anonymous? Oh, wow, that's something else. Well, met this fellow on the street, this fella, and so forth, and he gave me this book, see. I read this book, and I threw it in the garbage pail. Couldn't teach me anything, but I learned better after a while. When was that? Well, a few days later, I learned better. See. I had this awful hangover. And I just got fired, and I was being sued for divorce. And I found out they were your friends. That's what I found out, Tim. You're going to see a tone I'm starting with now. He has just told you that you can't possibly audit him. He has just told you that you can't possibly help him. So you just polish up the fingernails, audit him, help him, and somewhere up the line he finds out about it as a major cognition. But all the way up the line he's improving. Because if you can get tone, arm, motion, and get the guy with the session, see, by flicking that little old attention line right where it lives, parallel what the mind is doing, and it will do everything you want it to. Nothing new. That's the beginning lines, I think, of one of the first book things. But nevertheless, this gives you the anatomy of how that's done. You just find out about what this guy's mind's on, see? And if you can produce tone arm action by having him locate things about it, then he will recover from any obsessive or compulsive tendencies about it or toward it. It's the tone arm motion that takes off the compulsion, not the significance of what he digs up. Given enough tone arm motion on any given subject, and that subject will right itself in the head of the PC. And man, I'm talking from hard-won experience. I'd say if we've learned anything in the last 13 years, man, we've learned that. It isn't the significance alone. It's the tone arm motion that can be obtained in relation to the significance that brings about the recovery. Now, that's the fastest recovery is, of course, the tone arm motion plus the right significance to be run. Now, that's your fastest recovery. But your recovery takes place somewhat and eventually if you just produce tone arm motion. So all you have to do is produce tone arm motion on the case, regardless of what's run, and eventually, at some vast distance, why, this PC is going to recover from these various targets and so forth in the case. He's going to recover from them. That's for sure. But if you out at the right significance and get no tone arm action, the PC will never recover. Those are terribly important data.
This lecture is continued on side 2 of this cassette.
What's the date? 21st. 21st August, 8013. All right. We could cover an awful lot of stuff here. Be very easy to do. The main things in which you are involved at the present moment probably look far more complicated to you than they are. I'm going to talk to you some more about the tone arm in the Itsa line and forms of sessions. Things look to you a lot more involved than they actually are. Sitting somewhere back of every Thetan's bank is some tremendous insecurity in which he believes implicitly that the universe is dangerous, or that he himself is in danger, or that he cannot live or survive as a powerful being. And whatever that state is, and however that state is created originally, is not particularly germane to this lecture. But the discovery of the Itsa line may look to you to be a highly simple little thing, perhaps even a duplication of psychoanalysis. After all, they talked. And if you didn't know anything about the Itsa line, you could draw all sorts of wild conclusions, you see. Make the mistake of saying, well, it's a communication line, and therefore any communication line is an Itsa line. And therefore, if you let anybody talk about anything, why, he will get better. We already know if you let a fellow talk on an N theta line very long, he'll run his havingness out the bottom. So the complexities of the Itsa line are really quite something. It sits on a tremendous amount of technology, but in itself is very simple to understand. There's nothing much to understanding it. If you understand it, you'd see actions like this very readily and immediately. These actions be something like this. PC said, I don't know whether it was, let's see now, it was 20, I guess about 20 years ago, and the fellow said, I don't know what he said, but I know what I think about it. I know that I think it was a big swindle of some kind or another. And come to think about it, I don't know whether I said that or he said that. Auditor. It reads that he said it. Oh, wait a minute. What happens at this point? What occurred there exactly? Well, you know at once what occurred if you know the Itsa line. The auditor put in the Itsa with the beater, leaving the PC in a zone and area of insecurity. Now we say, all right, the line plot. The line plot, that tells the PC what items are in the GPM. You just like that, see? So obviously we say, well, this to some degree puts in the Itsa line for the PC. Well, no, that could be said to, but we get across the proposition of the lesser of two evils. If you've ever seen a PC wrapped around a telephone pole with undisclosed charge from running a GPM he knew not what of, or did not know any of the elements of, you will use line plots. If the thing is a known line plot, we will use it. Why? Because that was a pre-designed plot in the first place. There was an other determined design. You understand that somebody else determined the design. What's important about it is the charge that is on it, and what's important in the auditing is to get off the charge and get the PC to identify to his own reality that it's a. See, if the line plot you handed him on a sheet of paper didn't agree with the thing he was running, you will very shortly hear about it. He can get wrapped around a telegraph pole at great speed. But that's a shadow of putting in an Itsa line, isn't it? That's a shadow of putting in the Itsa line with the PC. But a necessary action. I'll give you its similar borderline. PC's 20 years ago, it's 50, no, it's 18, 20, 22. It's 22 years. I think it was 22 years. No, it must have been 25, 30. No, 21. I don't know. I don't know. I just don't know when it was. He quit, see? He quit cold. All right, what you going to do? Sit there with a PC who's quit cold? Or are you going to say, all right, I'll give you a hand? Was it more than 20 years ago? Less than 20 years ago? Was it 20 years ago? All right, it's more than 20 years ago. Is it more than 25 years ago? Less than 25 years ago? Less than 25 years ago. You got some idea of it now? Yeah, it was 23 years ago. Or was it more than 25? Less than 25? Less than 25? 23. 23. I'm getting a read here on 23. Yeah, it was 23. Get that? So you didn't totally put in the Itsa line. You could start putting the Itsa line in and the PC catches the ball. Put it almost totally in and the PC catches it. See? And get right on to the hour and the minute. And the PC never caught it, but at least you don't have something wrong dated. And those are the gradients of putting in the Itsa line. And the last one is, it's a little bit of a lose to have to put it all the way in for the PC. All right, now look at the length of time you and other fellows around have been stumbling around on this planet. There's a number of thousands of years. And the number of thousands of years you've been in the Marquette Confederacy are quite numerous. They probably run up to 200,000 or 300,000 years that you've been inside this system. And let me call to your attention, never during that time could you put your foot on the first step of the road which led back to a better life and some happiness and freedom, see? Now, you couldn't get a foot on that road at all. All right now you have technology. You have a map. The map's got all kinds of blank spots in it. But nevertheless, there's the type of map it is, don't you see? And those are persuasions toward an Itsa line. And the only time you totally lose is when you have to put the whole Itsa line in. Give somebody the pattern for a goal. All right, he has to list for the actual goal in that sequence and find it. And he has to list for and get the top op term to make it in order to fit the pattern. And then he's got to fit the pattern together. And this is an awful lot of Itsa. See? Well, all right, so you've got the pre-printed pattern. Give him this, and he just reads it off. You understand this is less desirable, but it's still feasible. All right, now let's put it totally in. Let's just hit him with a lightning bolt so that he can't contact any of the facsimiles in it. And we have medical psychiatry. See, the evil involved in this is putting in an Itsa line in such a way as to have no self-determinism, no power of choice left in the PC at all. Total wipeout of power of choice, don't you see? Now, you can fall short of that in various degrees. Little kids going around, see? He's real unhappy about the whole thing. He's real unhappy about life. And he's walking around in circles and so forth, and you say to him, that is your bed. Well, you haven't really done very much for him, but you have improved his state of mind or his peace. See? Just to that degree, you understand? You say, that is your bed. Nevertheless, you have put in the Itsa line. He himself has not found out that it is his bed, you see? But, look, he's still very happy to have the bed. Now, when we get down into pure, unadulterated evil, we get a denial of the Itsa line, and we go into aberration, creation of. So this whole thing inverts. And we get KU, CDEI, 0F, that whole scale of means of perverting the Itsa line. Now, those means, well, include an inability to ever find anything, an inability to reach anything, and so forth. Well, now, medical psychiatry, to amend what I was saying a moment ago, is of the inclination that it is better, you see, for nobody to have anything to do with anything. See? Now look at that as an inversion. That's an inversion of the fact. Now the aberration of this line, perversion of this Itsa line, has to be very direct in order to be very aberrative. You have to pervert the line, you see, just outrightly put in something false or put nothing there, you see, or and so on, or inhibit very directly. And you have to work at it. It has to be worked at, and so on. Given the slightest chance, why the PC will start putting in his Itsa line. But what does he put his Itsa line in on? All right, let's take Freudian analysis. He puts in his Itsa line on childhood sexual incidents. It's not aberrative. Anybody get any place? Oh, Papa Freud did contribute something. He said there was a possibility. Great. Let's applaud him for that. But he was putting the Itsa line in directions that didn't wind up with anything. And then after he got through, he put the line in. Totally. The practitioner put the line in. So he said, the reason why you were aberrated now is we have finally found out that you had a fetish going. You had a fetishism. And actually, your little brother's right shoe has aberrated your whole existence. And that is why you are always talking about the feet on chairs, you see. And now we've got this all explained, and you are better. Now that's all very fine, but he didn't look at the hypnotic character of the statement, you are better. That's putting in the Itsa line. All right, we got some guy walking around in circles out here. Let's take a look at these various gradients of putting in the Itsa line for somebody. You'll gradually see what I'm talking about, what I'm driving at here. Got some guy walking around in the circles, and man, he doesn't know which way to turn. He's got lumbosis, and he's been aberrated by hearing of a psychiatrist when he was young. And he's got all kinds of things, you see. He's having a hard time. having a hard time. And you say something can be done about it. Well, you've put in some variety of Itsa Line, haven't you? And that's what you call a hope factor. And this guy very often responds to this, and he feels much happier about this, don't you see? You see that the hope factor then is to that slight degree putting in the Itsa Line. See? It's not really much of an Itsa Line. You're not saying, but you're saying it is not. It is not hopeless. See? You're sort of putting in a negative line for him a little bit there, and you carry him along. You see, as we look at this problem, we'll see that there are various degrees of putting in the Itsa Line for somebody. See, there are various degrees of this, and these things vary from the very, very evil, which is to say, hand a guy a pomegranate and say that's a bomb. See, that's putting in a false Itsa Line. They vary from that up to making it impossible for him to put it in. That's in a lower grade, making it impossible for the person to put it in its line. Varies up to the little necessary actions necessary to begin the flow of the Itsa Line. See, and these little necessary actions are such as start a session. And the basic intent is what makes the difference. That's the first fundamental difference, although this too can go too far. But the basic intent is what makes the most fundamental difference. Do you intend to improve this person's Itza-ing ability, or do you intend to knock it into a caulked F? Which? So it begins right there with the intention. And that gives you the difference between the cowboys in the white hats and the cowboys in the black hats. And it's right there, man. Bang. Intention. Decrease this person's ability to Itza. Cowboys in the black hats. Intention. By some or any means, to improve this person's ability to Itza. Cowboys in the white hats. That's good and evil. Defined in terms of the Itza Line. That's the difference between freedom and slavery. That's the difference between making freemen and making slaves. You make slaves by the intention to decrease the ability to put in the Itza Line. That's how you make a slave. And that gives you the whole textbook of how to make slaves. Right there. Complete with gold letters and a chain pattern cover. And the other way is to improve the person's ability to Itza. In other words, to identify, to spot, to find out. There we have that point from which we can separate the Scientologist from the medico. We can separate the decent civilizations from the lousy ones. We can go right on through there. This quarter of the universe, by the way, is suffering from an overdose of lousy civilization. See, that's what it's suffering from. Apparently has been recently conquered in recent times, in the last few 100,000 years. But those who were conquered had already been, their governmental actions, had already been set up for their own failure. See? They'd been set up to be conquered by using themselves mental technology which made slaves. They implanted their own troops. We're going to plant somebody up to be a loyal soldier, to fight bravely, to never give up his body so long as it is alive, to be true to the empire. We're going to plant somebody, are we? Remember, every one of those items we put into stick has to have a negative item. And that doesn't just cut it down 50%. That puts it in the betrayal line. It cuts it down enormously, because some empire that would do this to somebody gets their support like giving them the itch, see? Yeah, we'll help the general out, you know. Help him into the car so that he goes through the other side and falls out the opposite door, you know. It's an accident, you know. When the planes take off, half their motors don't run, you know. They're just running up against total sabotage because they've already got a slave empire. And you may be able to force a group by slavery and so forth into a semblance of a civilization, but it's only ever a semblance. There's never anything to which anybody freely, wholeheartedly contributes. It has no strength. It has no power. Because remember, 50% of the implant is don't be a good soldier. And then the fact that the implant occurred at all, of course, is enough to knock one's loyalty in a cocked hat. Let's take an earlier and probably still extant organization, the Galactic Confederacy. 80 trillion years, smooth as glass, no implanting. Interesting. I don't know the exact length of the Espinal Confederacy, but it's probably something on the order of a few 100,000 years. Implants, no empire. The figures read themselves. Rome died at the hands of her slaves. That's for sure. She was never conquered by the barbarians. I know it looked very nice in the history books. But the truth of the matter is, who wanted to fight for Rome? You get through with a war, you come home, you find out the slave civilization's already taken over the farms. There's no need for your production. There's no need for a freeman. There was no pay to be a freeman. That was the reward and the pat on the back for having fought through the wars, you see. And started going into a civil war situation. And half of the Roman Empire was always fighting half of the Roman Empire. I don't remember the exact name of the battle. It doesn't occur to me. I read it in Gibbon, and it's probably wrong in Gibbon, and got cluttered up on it's either Massala or something like that. But the reason the first barbarians got to Rome was because she didn't have very large numbers in her armies. But 40,000 of her first-line troops lay dead at Massala in a civil war caused by unrest, caused by slavery. And they had no first-line troops. That was practically the entire call-up of the empire. And historians today trace back to that battle as the reason the barbarian was able to conquer the thing. Well, you trace back the battle, and you find the battle came because of civil war. And we find out why the Civil War came, and it came by slavery. The American Civil War that destroyed one of the better agricultural areas of America and so forth was, again, a battle about slavery, one way or the other. Every time you have slavery, you have trouble. You don't even have to be sentimental about it. You don't have to be sentimental. You can be terribly statistical. You don't have to say it's good or it's bad or anything else. You don't have to beat the drum for it or be a person who wants to reform things or something like that. Just look at the statistics. Slavery never pays off. That's it. It's dangerous. If anything is dangerous, it's slavery. You don't suppose America would be having very much trouble right now with its race riots and 250,000 Negroes about to converge on Washington and so forth if they hadn't kicked off this slavery. And it's very funny, but the most involved people in American slavery were the Bostonians. Used to have what they called the triangle trade. They'd send ships loaded with rum down to Africa and use the rum to buy blacks, as they referred to them. Use the whip and Christianity on them to bring them back over. And they traded in the blacks down around the West Indies and so forth for sugar cane. And they brought the sugar cane up to Boston and they made rum. And they shipped the rum to Africa. And they just had that worked out. And practically the first families of Boston are founded directly on slavery. Kennedy missed that. He wasn't there at that. Family wasn't in America at that particular time. His family got out from underneath another type of slavery. The landowner, the absentee landlord, the high rates, this type of economic slavery, and so forth. And these things go back to roots. In other words, we have catastrophes in all directions. We have the catastrophe of Boston, the catastrophe of Kennedy. Anyway, we've got a situation here whereby you trace world trouble. And you trace it straight back to slavery. I'm not trying to beat the drum for anything. Why do you think Russia can't get its feet under itself? And why is everybody having such a hard time with the Russians? And why are the Russians so silly as to evolve a slave economy such as communism and so forth? What's all this fuss? Well, this fuss goes back to the idea in early Russian history that a man belonged to the land. And when you sold the land, you sold the man with it. Well, the European civilization got out from underneath that 2 or 3 centuries before, and Russia has not yet got out from underneath that. She is still carrying the burden of her past chains. And therefore, she can't think straight. She's like trying to get a PC to think in the middle of a session, you know. Can't do it. That's a little more touching picture than they actually are painting. Actually, what I think is the White Russian prince and that sort of fellow, you see. He went back to the Between Lies there, and he came back and he picked up a body and became commissar. I don't think they really changed their faces very much. But the trouble with world affairs today is slavery. The greatest empire Earth ever had went down in the dust with slavery. The British Empire right now is having a rough time and is staggering around because of its efforts to colonize and to do this and to do that and do something about this and to free man and not to free man, and somehow or another to hold him in economic duress, don't you see, and not let him free, but then to let him free, and you know. Got all this trouble down here in Africa, running around in one way or the other. Well, that's the sort of trouble you get when you suddenly start taking the lid off something that has had the lid nailed down on for a very long time, you see. And without anybody around who really knows much about it, why, we get those boys going back into slavery, too. First action of a new African ruler is ordinarily to throw the whole opposition in jail because they are insufficiently enslaved by his regime, you see. This viewpoint. Now, I'm not discoursing on this just because I have a bee in my bonnet about it, because I frankly couldn't care less. As far as this planet is concerned, it'll never get out of any mess unless we get it out of that mess. And I'm just using the situation just to show you the liabilities of slavery. You always get a lashback. This always, because a Thetan never gives up. That's it. He really never gives up. He's lying there. He might look awful quiet. He might look terribly dead. He might look like he doesn't interfere with anything, you see. But in actual fact, he really never gives up. He's got some trick. You can put him in jail, immobilize him, wrap him all up in adhesive tape and electric cord and so forth, and he gets even with you. He sits there and thinks how he's right. All right, he even goes down to that point. See? He can hold that posture clear on down through the lowest levels of unconsciousness that he was right. Well, I think that's very interesting. Because if he ever gets out of it, he'll go on being right. If he ever gets out of it, he'll go on being right about what he was being right about before he got put in that state. In other words, the effort to dominate and deny power of choice is the road that this universe walked toward the hell it became. Fear, the unlovely specter of fear, stands ahead of all of those. Let's trace this out very carefully. To survive. All right, very good. This guy wants to survive. Whatever put him in the state of mind that he had to survive? Because this is your biggest piece of nonsense. A Thetan can't possibly do anything but survive. In fact, it's probably the trouble with him. And that's certainly the trouble governments and things have with him. That's the trouble the Markabians are having with him right now. How to kill a Thetan is the biggest problem in this universe. It's just not solvable. They thought they had it all solved when we came along. They just never really are able to whip this problem. How do you kill a Thetan? Well, it's not an elegant problem to whip. Now, how can a being who actually can't be struck at, who cannot do anything but survive and cannot die, who can pass through various lapses of memory and that sort of thing, how can this being get into a state of mind whereby he's concerned about survival? Well, it takes quite a lot of trickery to do that. Usually it's on the extension of self into a possession, like making a minion. You mock a mock-up up, and then you endow it with some life, you see. And then somebody comes along and starts to kick its head off, so you protect it and you identify yourself with it. Or you construct a civilization and identify itself with it. And you're trying to get the civilization to survive so that eventually you get worried about your own survival. You see the mistake which has to be made there. That mistake actually has to be made directly before a Thetan gets worried about his own survival. In other words, he has to extend some type of line onto something that he feels can't survive, and then identify himself with it to such an extent that he feels his own survival can be affected. And this is your first step into aberration. All right, your next step forward from this is an elementary step. Because one is now worried about survival, one resolves the problem of survival by domination. This is not any kind of a solution at all. It's a lousy solution. But it gets used. It's probably that which is not admired tends to persist. That very definitely applies in this particular line, because domination is probably the least admired thing in this universe, and yet, oddly enough, is continuously successful. But it's really not successful. So domination comes in here, and we have Thetan A and Thetan B, and the way that Thetan B is kept from destroying Thetan A's construction or civilization, don't you see, is by Thetan A dominating Thetan B, you see. That is the formula by which this is arrived at. So Thetan A, to protect something he wants to have survive, therefore seeks to dominate Thetan B. And then being in a frame of mind where he feels he himself cannot survive, then he just obsessively goes on and dominates Thetans B, C, D, E, F, and G. See? But he overlooks the fact that if he dominates Thetans B, D, E, F, and G, sooner or later, thetans, B, D, E, F, and G in their term are going to dominate. You see? Because we've set up a cause-effect line, and the best thing you know about a cause-effect line, we may not know much about overt motivator sequences. We know all about the cause-effect line from which the overt motivator sequence comes. And the best thing about those things is the communication contains cause-distance-effect with intention and duplication. And because of the duplication of the intention, then any communication line will reverse. That's the easiest thing a communication line does, is reverse, because, of course, it has duplication on both ends. It's very easy for cause to become effect and effect to become cause because there's a duplication in the communication line. All you have to do is make a slight mistake of which is cause and which is effect, and you have the waiters, which at one time through the last century served people in black tuxedos. You know, the guests all wore black tuxedos and so forth. You have the waiters now wearing black tuxedos, you see. And you look at any custom as it comes along in this universe, you're actually studying the cause-distance-effect duplication aspect of a communication line. It's going to reverse. Oh, there's lots of ramifications whereby we protest and we do this and we do that. But this fact, any custom you see on this planet at this time, you can absolutely count on its having been the reverse custom at an earlier date. Now, this makes an awfully broad statement, but if you look into it, you'll see that's the case. I take the clothes today of women and the clothes today of men. Well, you don't have to look back very far to where you see that one flipped, you see. And you look into almost any custom you can follow down, and you'll find out it's slipped. It went the other way, too. So the formula of communication, and communication itself, then, is the most important factor in looking for aberration. It's very elementary. Why? It's cause, distance, effect with intention, duplication. The duplication factor then makes the C very easily look like the E, and the E look like the C. So, of course, the line can reverse around the other way, too. And we get all sorts of superstitions about overt motivator sequences. We get all kinds of things. Of course, that's factual, but it's simply based upon the nature of a communication line. We beat somebody's head in, and we beat somebody's head in, and we beat somebody's head in, and we beat somebody's head in. Of course, at cause, you have the intention to beat somebody's head in, and at effect, we have somebody's head being beaten in. That's pretty elementary. And one fine day, we wake up with a headache. Where'd the headache come from? Well, one slipped. One made a misidentification of the C and the E on the line, see? It was quite accidental. You're reading a book by Montaigne or something, and it said, and thy servant, he is a man too, see? Something like this, you know. Guy just, I don't even know if Montaigne said that. But have to add these erudite points when you don't have your quotation dictionary handy. Besides, I usually find out I can make up better quotation than they said anyhow.